Hello, my name is Laura Kahler. I'm a contractor for South Dakota Specialty Producers Association. Thanks for joining our webinar tonight, Soil Health and Your Livestock, with guests Gwen Kitzan of Kitzan Family Farms and Jaelyn Whaley of SDSU Extension. This segment is funded by a partnership with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, NRCS, and South Dakota Specialty Producers to promote sustainable agriculture practices and environmental stewardship. Gwen, you can take it away.
Okay, well, perfect. Well, thank you very, very much for inviting me to kind of share my family story and the challenges we had in the early days, soil health and where we're at. My name is Gwendolyn Kitzan. My husband and I are Kitzan Sheep, but we also do a lot of direct marketing, and that's my daughter-in-law, Heather Kitzan, and myself. There's our email address, and also there is our websites if you're interested. During this presentation, I do want to make it very clear, I am not a veterinarian. We rely on our veterinarians really, really hard for everything we do. And I do not work for USDA or NRCS. We do use their services, and I'm going to talk quite a bit about how our veterinarians have helped us overcome some challenges with soil health and how we're related to animals, and also how USDA and NRCS has helped us improve our soil. So I guess we have to kind of start back to the very beginning. When my husband Dwight and I moved on our South Dakota place back in 1989, we brought our sheep with us, and all of a sudden, it was probably within 6 months, we are noticing we are having some difficulties with our sheep that we never experienced before. And we had accurate records on everything because we've always kept really good records on our sheep, you know, the birth weight, the weaning weight, post-weaning weight, lambing percentage, open ewes, everything, wool quality. We kept very good records on everything, but all of a sudden we noticed our wool quality was not as good as it was. Our lamb weights were decreasing. We were having trouble with milk production, parasites. Load was coming up constantly. Our conception rate was decreasing. We were very disappointed in our lambing percentage, and we had some non-thriving lambs. But why? What was doing all this cause? What was happening? You know, and always the joke, especially when you raise registered stock like we do, the joke is, well, it had to be the ram. It had to be the program. But we knew the program hadn't changed, but something did. Something happened when we moved on our place here in South Dakota. So what we did is we reached out to our two veterinarians, Dr. Bill Marlette and Dr. James Myers with the Belle-Pouge Veterinary Clinic, and talked about the issues that we were having. Right at that point, we had an opportunity to buy some lambs because my husband loves to feed out lambs. And what we discovered is we had some purchased lambs that never in their history or their mother's history or any place in that one producer never used a mineral program at all. Now, we also had the ones on our place that were on a mineral program. So what we need to do, according to Dr. Marlette, fresh out of veterinarian school at that time, I mean, just a young gun and ready to roll, is we needed to do liver biopsies. We had a chance to have a clean test of some purchased lambs, but we needed to see what was going on with our home raised that are on the program. So we did the liver biopsies, and the tests came back exceptionally interesting. So the test group, now if you're going to look at this date here, this is in 1994. So we're talking, you know, 30 years ago, just about 30 years ago when this all came out. And it says right here, you know, one group was on the mineral program, trouble with scours, parasites, possible mineral imbalance. We were doing our monitoring, everything like this. Once received no mineral, went on the mineral program. Now, of course, you know, these records are 29 years old. Now, down here, you're going to see where it says Cu, the copper, that should be between 88 and 350. And the zinc should be 105 to 260s. And these are Dr. Marlette's handwriting clear back then. But look at this. calcium's way up. Copper is way down. You know, our iron is out. Everything is completely out of balance. Completely out of balance. Now, on the mineral program, it was even worse. And we're going, how is this even possible? My husband and I, you know, we're supposed to be college educated people. We're supposed to say, okay, you always put your sheep in a mineral program. This is a protocol that we have always used. So why are these lambs, here's the ones that are not on the mineral program, never had mineral, versus the ones that did. Okay, I'm kind of going fast because there's a lot of information to cover, and Jaelyn's going to help us a lot on this program. Okay, so what is causing this? Why are we having all this trouble? We went and took water samples. We took it from our dams. We took it from the Bellefouche irrigation water. We had it from Butte Mead water. We collected forage samples, pasture samples, hay samples, alfalfa samples, grain samples, sent all that in. We actually went out and took soil samples to find out where we were at. We even took the purchased mineral that we had, and we sent that in for analysis. We had to find out what was going on if we were going to stay in this business. So this is the soil sample that came back, and you can see right over here, look at this, manganese very high. And then if you come down over here to the copper very high. But remember, back in that other screen, the sheep didn't have any copper. Now the copper is exactly what is, you need copper in the system of those sheep and cattle. Very much the same thing was happening with the cattle out here at the same time, because that helps with your wool production. It's also going to help with your parasite loads. You got to have that. But the soil sample says we're very high. So what was going on? Simple. We were so high in moly or magnesium, or Jaelyn's going to have to help me with that, that it was tying up the copper. But then what was happening is this was the custom-made mineral that we had. This not custom-made. This is a standard mineral you buy, you know, for sheep. You know, if you look on here, there is 0 copper. And what was happening is by us feeding this sheep mineral that you get at most farm stores, it was making the matter even worse. So what we ended up doing with the help of Dr. Marlette and Dr. Myers, we went through a company down in Norfolk, Nebraska, and Vitamin, and actually with the help of them is we had to create our own mineral to off balance what was happening in the soils and in the feed, and actually what the animal was intaking, what was doing the intake. Now the interesting part, look at this, we were actually feeding the sheep the mineral, and very high in zinc. And of course we bumped up the A, D, and E that we always need to do. And you're going, how in the world, everything we have ever been taught, you do not feed sheep to copper, or copper to sheep. The difference with this is right at this point of time is when the chelated coppers were coming out. And by feeding the chelated coppers, the chelated copper did not stay in the liver, causing liver damage. And so what the sheep needed to be used or needed, it actually was very much utilized. So now we're going to jump up back to 2014. So we're jumping ahead now. And we're still doing this, and we're checking. And what we are finding out now, that the program is working. We're right there. We do not have any deficiencies. And we know it was working because our lambing percentage went back up. Our ewe lambs were breeding, and we breed our ewe lambs at 8 to 9 months. The wool quality came back. Our parasite load decreased drastically, along with all the other problems that came up. Okay, I'm kind of going kind of fast because I know Jaelyn has a lot better presentation when it's going to talk about mineral than I have. Like I said, I am not a veterinarian. I want to make that very, very clear. But without the help of our veterinarian doing this, helping us find out where the problem was, we were able to solve the problem. At the same time, the cattle industry, they were also having the same thing happening out here. Jaelyn?
Okay, thanks, Gwen. That was great. Switch gears here, and I will share. Yeah, so hopefully I can give kind of a big picture overview. It's just why Gwen and Dwight were seeing some of the things that they were seeing from specifically a soil health standpoint. If there's more questions on specifically like some of your mineral bioavailability or whatever premixes and things like that, we can talk about that too. But I'm going to focus on even without supplementation, how our soil health can actually play a role in some of those minerals that our sheep are getting as well. And so I guess if you didn't already figure out from some of Gwen's points, it's that minerals are extremely complex. And so even in research, we have a really difficult time always quantifying or following exactly what our minerals do in the body. But they play such an important role. And so I just briefly want to touch a little bit on our macro versus our micro minerals. Whether you're talking sheep or cattle or any other type of livestock, we have two different classifications. We have the macro minerals that are needed in a larger proportion of the diet. And then we have our micro minerals that are needed in much smaller portions, but still play pretty significant roles in the biological function of our animals. I also wanted to throw this up there so that when I use some of the abbreviations in the future, you'll have an idea of what those mean too. So when we look at soil health in particular, we know that there's so many things that play a role in making sure that our pastures are healthy. And when it comes to the mineral concentration of our plants in particular, we really look at three things. There's soil geochemistry, the biodiversity of plants on our rangeland, and then I'll hit on just a few other small soil factors such as like pH of your soil. But the two big ones we're going to focus on tonight is your soil geochemistry and your plant biodiversity. So your soil geochemistry is just a makeup of what minerals are actually in your soil in that location. And if you're wanting to look at what minerals to provide your livestock, your soil mineral makeup is really just a starting point, because not only do our animals metabolize those minerals, but so do our plants. And so not all of our minerals are always well predicted. Just because we have, for example, iron and copper, those might be high or low in the soil, but that's not necessarily well predicted of what our forages will actually contain. Whereas when we look at things like phosphorus, sodium, cobalt, zinc, and selenium in particular, those can be better predicted from the soil to get an idea of what you have in your pasture. And so this is just one example. You can Google USGS geochemical mineralogical maps, some big words, but then from there, once you get on the right website, you can click on geochemistry and click on the individual mineral that you're interested in. So the one that I pulled for tonight was our zinc, and typically we're going to pull just a topsoil profile because that's where the majority of our nutrients to our plants are coming from. And so you can see that aside from really central South Dakota and a few little pockets, we're pretty low in zinc across the state. And zinc actually itself has over 300 biological reactions. Gwen talked about how important it is for immunological function. It also plays a huge role in wool production. And this time of year, we really need to start thinking about our minerals and zinc in particular, because there has been some research out of Montana and Wyoming that show that it plays a really big role in reproduction and some of your reproductive success of your rams. And so you can use these maps as kind of a starting point, or you can go out and take a soil sample and actually get your individual operations soil geochemistry as well. So moving into plant diversity, this is probably one that maybe is a little bit easier to understand since it's not so, we can go out and take a survey of our pastures and see what's out there. And we know from a soil health standpoint that it's really important that we have a combination of not just a grass monoculture, but also having some forbs and shrubs on our rangeland helps promote a lot of those 5 principles of soil health, right? Well, the cool thing is that your forbs and shrub species, sheep are a lot more likely to consume those plants than like your cattle are. And so those plants are actually much higher in minerals. And I'll show some graphs in a little bit, but your shrubs in particular, if you have some kind of sage or something like that out on your pastures, those are actually going to hold both protein, energy, and your minerals almost year round, a lot better than your grasses will. We also want to see some legumes of some sort out there, as we know those are nitrogen fixers, but then your legumes are also pretty high in terms of their nutrient composition as well. In terms of plant diversity, we also need to think about our seasonal changes. We know that those plants across the board are going to be the highest in their nutrient composition in the spring and summer. And then we start to lose some of that nutrient composition as we move into winter and those plants are going into dormancy. And so again, just making sure that we have some plant diversity and are promoting that diversity on our rangelands is really, really important. As I mentioned, sheep are going to graze some of your forbs and shrubs more commonly, but they're also more likely to select for some of those very mineral rich parts of the plant. And so like this ewe lamb in the picture here, this fall we turned ewes out on a new pasture. And you can, if you look closely, you can see that she's actually moving the grasses aside to make sure that she can get to that little tiny piece of sage that she knows is going to have a better nutrient profile for her. And we sat and watched the ewe lambs do that for quite a while. And when it comes to plant diversity, it's not only within your bigger species, but even within those species. So these graphs don't get too caught up in the busyness of them, but basically what we're looking at is, 4 different minerals. The dark black dots on those graphs are for your western wheatgrass, and the big open white circles are crested wheatgrass. And then along your x-axis, you're just looking at day 0 would be January 1st all the way through day 365. So you can see the seasonal fluctuations, especially for like calcium and phosphorus. We see some pretty significant seasonal fluctuations in those plants. But then you can see how, especially as we move into late summer and fall, we start to see a big difference between things like our western wheatgrass versus crested wheatgrass. Here's just a couple graphs that show the black dots here are going to be grasses, and the big open white dots are going to be shrub species. And so again, you can see all of these forages were sampled in the winter months. But what you can see is obviously that those shrub species have a significantly higher mineral composition, while the grasses have gone completely dormant. We have very little nutritive value from those. A few other soil factors that will influence some of your plant mineral concentration. One is pH. Just like our bodies and our livestock's bodies, as we start to go through stresses, our body's going to metabolize and utilize different things. And so what they see in a lot of plants is that as your pH increases and you start to get into some of those more alkaline soils, you're more likely to see molybdenum and zinc in your forages. And like Gwen said, molybdenum and actually zinc, I believe to a certain extent, both of those are going to influence copper. Molybdenum and copper create what they call thiomolybdates in the rumen. And that makes copper virtually inaccessible to the animal. On the flip side of that, when you see a decrease in pH, so you have more acidic soils, we might see a higher concentration of cobalt and manganese in our plant species. And so just be, I guess, cognizant of that. If you know that you, especially out here, I think we see probably more of our alkaline type soils, that you can have a little bit of a mineral influence there as well. Our microbes here, I'm talking soil microbes, not just our rumen microbes. But whether it's bacteria or fungi, all of those play an extremely important role in making sure that our soil minerals are readily available to plants. One that I think is really neat is that our fungi in the soil is actually a key component to making sure that our plants have availability to calcium. And then finally, the other thing to consider, and Gwen alluded to this too when they were trying to figure out what was going on with their lambs, is you do need to take into consideration what your water mineral concentration is as well. That sometimes is influenced by your soil mineral concentration as we get some leaching and things like that into our stock dams. But definitely getting your water tested if you have some mineral concerns is going to be extremely important also. And then finally, kind of just go out and observe your plant communities. This doesn't require any sort of testing. It just takes you going out and looking and seeing what those plants are telling you that's going on underground. One of the really cool things I think is that some of our forbs, even if they get identified as something that we would consider a weed, are actually going to accumulate minerals that are low in the soil. So if you see an overabundance of a particular weed, in some cases, that actually means that that plant is thriving because they're able to sequester the mineral that's low in the soil. And so an example of this that we talk about a lot in the sheep world is leafy spurge. And our sheep graze it extremely readily. But leafy spurge is actually able to hold on to calcium. And so oftentimes, if you have a large leafy spurge patch, chances are you have low soil calcium. Some exceptions to this rule, though, are going to be sodium. So things like your foxtail will thrive in a high sodium soil, and those grasses are also going to be high in sodium. And then your nitrates as well. If you have ever gotten nitrate tested with us at SDSU or something like that, you know that high nitrate soils result in high nitrate plants. And one thing that you can do actually to test this theory is test your forbs or some of those weeds separately from your grasses. And so if your forbs are particularly high in one mineral and your grasses are low, chances are that your soil is also low, if that makes sense. But at the end of the day, I think whether you're wanting to test your soil or test your water, your livestock at the end of the day are grazing your forages and consuming your water. So making sure that we're getting our forages tested for mineral composition is probably your best bet to making sure that you're meeting your mineral requirements. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to Gwen.
Okay, thank you. And Jaelyn, I really appreciate, because one of the reasons I wanted Jaelyn to come in and join me today is because with Jaelyn's extensive background and her grad studies, she can explain what we saw. So many times, like as producers, we see what's going on out there and we use our veterinarians, but where does the science and technology come and play together in agriculture? And so that's the nice thing that Jaelyn is we're talking about. But you can't be more accurate, Jaelyn, is when you say you have to go out there and see what's going on in your pastures, in your fields, and just really observe. There's a technique, you can take a ruler and lay it out, or make a 3 foot by 3 foot square, count how many different forbs and grasses are out there. Some say, 4 to 10 is what you really want out there, because any grazing animal will actually search out, like you saw with your ewe lambs, to help balance their rumen and make their rumen happy. So I'm going to click over here to see if we can Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay, I gotta go someplace so I know how to figure out how to, I'm still learning how to do all this, so my apologies there. Okay, I'm going to go to, where did you say I need to go up there again? To, at the top, slideshow.
Right. But first we need to, well, that works too, but make sure on the Zoom part, you go to the
Yes.
bottom where it says share screen. It should be a green arrow pointing up.
Okay, let me see where I'm at. For some reason, I'm trying to open my site again. I do apologize for everyone. There we go. There we go. Share your screen again. Okay, perfect. There it is. Okay.
Yep, it's going.
Okay. Okay. Is there
And
now? Can you
now-
see my? Can you
Yep,
see my
and
screen
then-
right now?
We can. Then if you want on the top left, hit from current slide.
Okay, from current slide. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Going good. Okay.
Okay, excellent. So what we were talking about a little bit, we're going to talk about where NRCS and EQIP really came in to help fuel some of their needs. The history of our land over here is where we're at between Bellefouche and Newell. We're on the Bellefouche irrigation project. In clear back in the 1950s, there was a lot of sugar beets raised. And so those sugar beets actually, what we called, the old timers called mined the ground. That means they pulled a lot of nutritional factors out, and the organic matter dropped. Any of the beet tops were fed to the sheep and cattle, and really there was no organic matter left. And so when we first started doing our soil samples, you know, our organic matter was anywhere from 1.7 to 2.2. Very sad, very low. Since then, my husband has worked diligently to make it. Currently, we are at 4.5 to 5.5 in certain ones. How did he do this? And I give him the credit. He is definitely the one who did all of this. Whoops, I went back one too far. His tillage practices were number one. He started out with minimal till, and the problem, you have to know your ground. You have to, like Jaelyn said, you have to go out there and walk around. You have to dig, you have to look and find out what's going on. What would happen since the sugar beet days and until we bought this, the ground was covered very hard with a plow. And any plow, I don't know if you can see that, it comes and it is a shear pan because we're in heavy clay soil. And so it literally would make a pan so the roots could not go through it. It was called a shear pan and it was only about this far down. Well, the roots would come down and they would die. Then they would come and they would plow it up again and roll it again. And as we know with soil health and the microorganisms and everything that's going on, it's a breathing entity, the soil, 12 months a year, 365 days a year. But when they were completely turning that soil constantly, it was disrupting the bacterial flow all the time. So we did minimal till. Dwight ended up coming in, he took some rippers and actually had to break up with tillage equipment that shear pan so we could get the water penetration again. At the same time, livestock is critical to be on all these fields. I don't care if it's a corn field, you know, later in the fall, if it's a wheat field or a winter wheat field, you have to have livestock on it. You're going to not only control the weeds, because those livestock, they will sort it out, they will search it out. But remember, the sheep, cattle are going to do most incredible thing is that they're going to take that forage, they're going to go through the rumen, and they're going to mix it with everything that's happened in the rumen, and it's going to come out the other end. But what's happening in that rumen is breaking down the minerals, going out the end, rear end of the livestock, and it's going back and breaking those minerals down to feed the soil again. You know, what a perfect way to do this. So, but the other thing that we are such a firm believer in is cover crop, cover crop, cover crop, cover crop. Because what happens when you plant a cover crop, and round for us that we found the best cover crop is the turnips. We have tried to plant the radishes. The turnips are more successful. So not only are the sheep eating that, but the turnips will actually latch on to the nitrogen in the soil and hold it there, bring it to the top. Of course, you got a lot of organic matter going on. And then in the spring, it will start breaking down and deteriorating. And I have actually gone out there in this field that if you have a lot of turn, it's going to be a little ripe in the spring because that is it's decomposing. But you roll over a rock, you dig a little bit down the soil, and there is literally 1,000 earthworms all through that soil, just by changing some basic tillage equipment or practices. Now, as we know, with those earthworms coming up, guess what's going to happen? You're going to have more of everything Jaelyn was talking about for the soil health. Okay, now, how did NRCS help us improve our land? There's a lot of different programs out there through NRCS. In South Dakota alone, there's over 200 programs or 200 practices that a producer can go into their NRCS office, which is also the FSA office, and talk to them. What do you have? What can you help? One of the ones that they helped us with was the irrigation water improvement. Saline is a big issue here, getting the water on and off the ground because of you just got to get the water on, but you have to get the water off. So like pipelines, there's been help with pivots. There is water sensors, so you know exactly how much and how deep that water is going into the soil. They had a program a little while ago that really helped us. It was called the Nut Balls. This was through Texas A&M, where we would go out and take I've actually followed the sheep, picked up some fecal samples, sent it in for analysis. But what we were looking for is we could look and see exactly what those sheep are utilizing and not utilizing. What we found out is what pastures at certain times of the year were having and maintaining higher nutritional factors, so we knew where to go to graze and breed versus the ones that probably need to have a little supplement or to use them for different times of years for grazing. They'll help you out with pasture rotation. And what Jaelyn was talking about earlier, like the interspecies grasses and legume seeding, nutrition management, and is it PET? Well, should be actually pest management system. They're going to be talking a lot about that also. Right up here, if you copy up, it was at Equip Fact Sheets here at USDA. If you click on that link or write it down, if you click on that, they're going to pull a lot of information of what it's going to help the benefits and tell you what they can do. Like I said, over 200 practices, for working, and that's the key word right there, working farms, ranches, forests. They also go into some high tunnels and everything like that. They also will tell you how to go find your FSA center in your community. They will give you assistance on how to apply for the EQIP programs. There is assistance to help cover the cost of implementing these programs. Like I said, and it's for all types, conventional, organic, specialty, commodities, and historically underserved. They're also going to talk about on-farm energy initiative. There's one going on out there right now. A lot of conservation grants out there right now with the current administration. But they will work with you one-on-one to develop a conservation plan. Okay. Now, that being said, this sounds like all peaches and roses and everything all good and everything like that. Over here, you can see a lot more list of everything that they can help. We are doing the manure sampling also, by the way. You better be a record keeper. I can't stress that enough. So I just pulled out one of my books of record keeping. Of course, remember this is an ongoing, it's an ever-breathing ongoing book of practices that we have done and the documents and records that you need to do. You have to be a record keeper if you're going to participate in any of these government programs. You have to document. They will give you a list of things and they will help you document, but you have to do the work. I cannot stress that enough. It's not say, oh, well, I'm going to, sign up for XYZ, but oh, thank you for, doing that. But no, you have to go out and you have to do the work and document and work with them. I can't stress that enough that you need to work with your NRCS office and your FSA offices when you're doing this program. It does work. but it is work. So I guess that's kind of what I had a little bit. Jaelyn, do you want to add a few more things before I see if anybody has any questions?
No, I think that was great, Gwen.
Do our other moderators have any questions at all?
We had one question come in on the chat, and I think Jaelyn has it answered, and Christine helped transfer that over.
Oh, excellent.
Christine, have you
Excellent.
got any more questions come in?
No, and for those who weren't sure, the question was how can SDSU and NRCS help producers? And I think Gwendolyn did a really great run through of all of the different programs that NRCS offers. And in the comments, we've shared some links to those resources. And then SDSU Extension has a whole list of extension specialists that Jaelyn shared. So she also gave her contact information if anybody wants to message her directly.
I guess one question always comes up for me is how do you take a liver sample? How do you take a liver biopsy? It's really simple. It is now, I guess. When we were first doing it, we learned a lot. So what we do is when we process a lamb, or when you process a beef, just go in and take a little, like a 1 inch cube by 1 inch cube, Jaelyn, I would say. Doesn't take very much. Put it on ice or an ice pack, take it into your veterinarian, say, I would like to have this sent off for a liver analysis to see where we were at. For us, it is the most, how do I say, the dollars that we have spent to do the liver biopsies has given us the biggest return. As Jaelyn has stressed time and time again, she said, the soil says this, we do tissue samples on the plant and they say this, but the livestock is saying this, and the liver biopsy is going to give you such an accurate picture of where you're at. And like I said, we will probably do like 5 different animals at a time. So we don't have just a animal, but actually a snapshot. 2 years ago, it came back and said, you were a little short of cobalt. Well, hey, that was easy. We just fed some blue salt. And so we do this once a year just to make sure where we were at. But we have alkali seeps out here, like you do a lot of places in Western South Dakota. So like Jaelyn was talking about your pH balances in your soil, go out there and look. If you have any questions and you do not know where to start, get into your FSA office, get in and see NRCS. They're going to help you. And they're going to give you the directions on where to start on helping. And Jaelyn is probably, I guess that's the best thing that Colorado sent us in a long time. But he is very knowledgeable. Like I said, she did a lot of grad work on that. SDSU has some very talented people there that are going to be able to answer questions also.
And I will add too, if like Gwen's getting lambs processed regularly, if you don't have animals that you're processing regularly, you can take blood and get some of your mineral analysis done through a blood sample as well. But you can also, on cattle, I don't know very many people that have done it on sheep, but on cattle, you can take live liver biopsies if your veterinarian is comfortable with that. They can go in and actually, your liver heals itself extremely quickly. And so a vet can go in on cattle and take a live liver biopsy.
Don't do live on sheep. Don't do live on sheep. Go do it on cattle.
Well, thank you. I'm glad, Gwen, that you brought that extra tidbit up at the end on how it's done. Any other questions? All righty. So with that, thank you, Gwen and Jaelyn, and any guests joining us today. We appreciate your time and knowledge of ruminants' health and how that can equate to soil health practices. For more information, you can contact Gwen through her family farm website. Gwen, do you want to scroll back to your first slide where you had your contact information? And then Jaelyn can be found on SDSU Extension's website, and she also put it into the comment section. This segment has been funded through a partnership with the Natural Resources Conservation Services. and SD Specialty Producers to promote sustainable agricultural practices and environmental stewardship. Please visit the SD Specialty Producers page at sdspecialtyproducers.org to view our upcoming events, find producers, and to become a member. Join us next week for learning about aquaponics with Nom Nom Gardens on August 28th at noon Central. Thanks.
Thank you.